Welcome back, audience. And in this little video, I want to record some clarifying information about elements, masculine, feminine, yin and yang dynamics, and how it relates to the states of consciousness, which includes all the feeling, the emotion, the images, thoughts, and sensations, which creates your entire experience. And the first thing that I want to start with is with this idea that everything is a toroidal field. And if you look at the reciprocating toroidal field, which is basically the essence of everything, before it splits into elements, there's no really discrepancy between those four elements. It's just one reciprocating toroidal field. But in that reciprocating toroidal field, you can already find those elements that you can segment them basically with your mind, right? With your imagination. And you see the movement that's going up, and you see the movement that's going down. The movement that's going up, that's fire. The movement is going down, that's water. Okay, and they're reciprocating and intertwining and creating this web, right? And that basically shows this ultimate state of bliss and peace. A beautiful, infinitely reciprocating toroidal field. That's at the essence of reality, where all the elements are put together in this reciprocating toroidal field. But they're there. For example, the earth is whenever any centric movement, from the up down towards the center and from the down up towards the center, that is the earth. And any dispersive movement from the center away in that vortex kind of fashion, that's air. So you can already see those four elements encoded in the motion of those two elements that basically denotes the upward movement, which is fire, and the water. Okay, I want to also explain the principle, the hermetic principle, as above so below, as within so without, in a normal layman's terms of what it is, and using this little idea of how elements are actually formed that pertains to the states of consciousness. We're not talking about, at this point, the physical elements, even though in the physical reality they can be seen and how they interact. You can see that is a reflection of the consciousness and the deeper states of consciousness. But now, the first thing that I want to say about this fire going up, water is going down. Fire is the one that sort of like creating that beam of light, and the water is that opens up, that facilitates that flow of light. So in this case, you see the masculine and the feminine in the primordial state. That's what's already reciprocating. It's not creating any other types of patterns. You see, it's not creating any types of patterns, it's just one reciprocating toroidal field. And so that is a pure state of consciousness, out of which everything else is going to be made of. And that state of consciousness, like it's a peaceful bliss, as I say, is the infinite state of consciousness. But it's not doing anything. So it's just reciprocating in that type of fashion and creating the experience of this white bliss, if you will. Okay? Now, what happens? The split happens. And during that split, the elements become very obvious and clear. Toroidal field becomes skewed towards, for example, the centric motion or eccentric motion. If it's skewed towards more eccentric motion, that's going to be air dominant. If it's going to be a more centric motion, that's going to be earth dominant. There's basically any kind of irregularity that you introduce to that perfect reciprocating field will create these states of consciousness that are not pure and ideal. And so this is the first view of the elements in action, so to speak, and how they're interacting and creating these states of consciousness. At this point, it's just feelings and emotions. Okay, and so what you would call a soul. Okay, but at this point, because there is that separation, it splits into uh, 7 colors, which means there's like a 7 frequencies. Whereas before it was just like all frequencies and white light put together. Now they split up and create that rainbow. And each color is a form of that bliss. Okay, but at this point, it's split into those 7 rainbow colors, and there's an experience of variety of that pure feeling of bliss, which becomes these emotions. And at this point, from the spirit world, which is always pure, you enter into the ether world, which is the soul world. That spirit is becoming in motion, and it's beginning to move in specific patterns, and is creating those primordial emotions, primordial feelings that at this point still coherent and beautiful. Which means that all the elements, even though the differences in them is obvious due to the split, they're still reciprocating in 7 rainbow colors. Okay, then there's another split that happens again, and at this time, soul splits into the mind and body. It's also remains there as well, of course. And from the ether, you have the sometimes called the mana world, or the world, sometimes called spirit world, but it's not. It's astral world. It's not. It's a very different world, because it's the world of forms that that ether pattern that hasn't really formed into anything. It's just like a pure emotion at this point, which is still a type of pattern, but it's not formed into the images yet. And so the mind creates that into the image, and then it comes into the body as some sort of form, sensation. Okay, so there's this process that's going on. Now, at this point, we can say what is within, what is without. Because of that split at the soul level into the mind and the body, we have a mind and we have a body that is becoming separate, but meaning that the formation in the mind will result in sensations in the body. They're connected. At this point, there's a connection still there. So, as above, so below. What happens in the imagination world, in the astral world, will become in the physical world, as above, so below. But now, that split created the 2 toroidal fields, right? One above, one below, and there's still one that is reciprocating. So there's one reciprocating toroidal field, and there's 2. And so then, when you have this type of dynamic, there's an experience, a creative experience of the world and you in the world. Because you have a mind, you have a body at this point. Before, you didn't have that. Now you have the mind, the body, the heart, and the essence of the spirit. But there's no problem at this point. The creation happens naturally and easily, and just like a creative and playful type of state. Because between the mental world, or the astral world, and the physical world, the body world, there is a reciprocating soul that still weaves everything together into the quality of experience. This is why at this point all the mental images are blissful and and peaceful, and all the physical sensations of blissful and peaceful type of innocent state. Now, at this point, you can say what is within as without. What is within and as within, so without. What does it mean? It means that what is the quality of the state of your soul? This is the quality of the experience. That's how your thoughts going to feel like, and this is how your sensation is going to feel like. That is determined by your soul, the quality of your experience. Okay. So the quality of your life is going to be determined the quality of your soul, and whatever form is going to come into the physical depends of what kind of form was in the mental. That is the true meaning. As above, so below, as within, so without. Okay. Now, it's talking about the quality of the experience, and also it's talking about the form of the experience. That's what it means. Now, then there's another split that happens, and then that's where the game begins. And that's another split is the incarnation in some reality, in this case, Earth. And now the game is reconnect that split in your soul that happens. And each split that took place is a type of distortion, as I call them. Sometimes people call it wounds. I don't like call them wounds because they're not wounds. No one injured you. It's like you can call pieces of the puzzle that are separate and you have not put them together wounds. They're not wounds. It's distorted, sure, but you got to put it together. It's not the same. And this is why it creates the experience of some reality that you appear to be hurt, but that was already there. It just created that and showed that it's there. Now you can actually begin the real game, which is alchemy, and reconnect that eros and logos that was split. And this way, every time you face the ego and you transmute from the ego into the soul, you're actually recovering your soul, so to speak, but really you are creating it also, because it's going to be unique based on the roles that you play, and so on and so on. But I don't want to expand too much on this. I just want to say that the soul game will determine the quality, that as within, so without. As you're going to be alchemizing all of these distortions, the quality of your experience is going to be improving. Now, but we also have the mind game and we have the body game, right? Which, by the way, I have to say that there are 4 different facets that pertains to the masculine. In those 4 realms, there's 4 different masculine motions. Attention, that's spirit realm, and that's what you do use for alchemy, attention and awareness. Then the soul realm, which is like what you do with that spirit that you gained after you alchemize that distorted matter. It turns into the ether, and then what do you do with that ether? What kind of emotions are you going to be creating? And that's the soul game. And that is inspiration driven. Inspiration. And then the mind is, of course, intention. Is what kind of mental intention do you have? That's the image that you're going to create. That's the astral world that you're going to create. Right? And then that's going to come into the physical, and that is determined by motivation or action. This is why I said that having a motive in your heart is no good, but your body will always operate based on the motive. The motive says that we have to connect some physical dots. Lift the cup and drink this. There's a motive there. You see? And so it's okay. Body's thirsty. give some water. Body's hungry, give some food. There's a motive there, and it's totally fine to move at the body level from the motive. It's totally fine to move, and in the mental world of the intention, what kind of intentions that you have. It's totally fine to move in your soul level through the inspiration, and it's totally fine to dissolve all the negative feelings through your attention. So you use a certain faculties on all four of the game's realms, or you can see them in the all sorts of archetypical structures. I think that what I'm describing is a toroidal dynamics, and everything is encoded in there. Even the words that I say, the vibrations that I make with my mouth, it's all toroidal dynamics. There's nothing outside of. Everything is made out of this, toroidal fields, which is how my experience right now is about holographic toroidal dynamics. That explains everything, encodes everything. Nothing is outside of it. Everything starts with that. And when you know this, the physics of electromagneticity and how the toroidal dynamics works, and when you know the metaphysics of it, and when you experience those states, you can't possibly deny, and you can't possibly be making any mistakes of what it is. And then everything can pertain to that. And then that's when the it's sometimes called syncretism, where you can see that everything fits to this one holographic field, toroidal holographic field, and everything can be fit in that little field. But I also have to differentiate that a person can have a syncretic capacity of seeing links between the thing and saying like, oh, this is the exact same thing, and it all pertains to this one thing. But it doesn't mean that they're an alchemist. They can do that with the information that is from the outside, not the information that came from the inside. And that's the difference. And so the people who are engaged in syncretism only and not alchemy, they make a lot of mistakes and misinterpretations, because sometimes they take things literally. For example, the tongue and the roof of the mouth. They understood that as literal. It's not literal. Because you have to experience the state of consciousness to realize what does the tongue and the roof of the mouth mean. It's not a physical action. This is why everybody, started moving that tongue and the roof of the mouth. It does nothing, absolutely nothing. It is a metaphorical expression that means when the capacity to sense and the thing that you're sensing are one. Okay, that's what it means. It means the reciprocating toroidal field, the capacity to sense where the desire and the contentment is in one. That's what it means. The tongue touching the roof of the mouth, basically tasting itself. This is what was trying to be said. But if the person is not doing the alchemy, it will not come from within. It will make a lot of mistakes. Still cool information, still really cool, but it's not the complete picture. And a lot of misunderstandings at that level. Now, there's two ways to reconnect those upper field and the lower field and to regain that light, the false way and the real way. The alchemy is the real way of how to reconnect those split that happens upon incarnation or upon booting up the video game. It is this this puzzle game that you do at your soul level every time there is a distortion that arises, which is a negative feeling. And every time you alchemize that negative feeling. I'm not going to go into details, but watch my previous video about alchemy, of how to actually do that, and how actually life must be lived, how this video game must be played. That's the first thing, that you start with that. Until you start with that, you're going to be revolving in the same. It's going to be revolution, but the quality of life is remaining the same. And to resolve that disconnection between the above and below, all sorts of ego tantrums that are being born, and to resolve that, something people use the physical power, and they try to control situation through the physical means. And then you have like these very militant people that use leverage, law, military power, and so they tend to take these positions because that's how they reconcile that disconnection in their heart. But if you do this way, there's still, the heart is this dark, and the difference between the dark and the light is when those two fields, the astral and the physical, are intertwined and creates this, okay, let's say those two fields like that, boom. You see that little center? That's the soul right there. And that happens after you alchemize it. If you don't do that, and you try to have that reconciliation externally through the physical means or the mental means, which I'm going to explain the other side, you have this thing, and that is ego. This little thing over here, soul, ego. Okay, externally and internally, internal reciprocation. And there's just two ways of life. This is what I've been talking about for the foreseeable past, that there's just two directions of life. Now, another way to reconciliate that lack of light in your heart through the false means is through imagination and magic. So some people go into the dark tyrant or the barbarian, right? Like somebody who goes into the physically controlling the reality. That's a barbarian archetype. And then some people go into the mentally controlling reality, and that is the warlock, I suppose, the archetype, right? They control it through the imagination. And so both are the villain paths. And of course, there's a masculine and a feminine counterpart for each side. Okay? Neither of which are going to lead to the increasingly developing quality of experience. The life is supposed to be in a sensation of continuously getting better and better and better. That is when you are living life in the right direction. Now, to start this engine up, that's what the alchemy is necessary. But once it's running, then you don't continue to be alchemist. You do your work as an alchemist, and then it runs by itself once the work is done. But the work must be done. Okay. If you don't do that work, everything else you do is just gonna work in the wrong ways. This is what that saying says. If the wrong man uses the right means work in the wrong way. And what does it mean? It means the quality of your soul. It doesn't matter how precise and how calculated your good intentions are. They're gonna work in the wrong way. Because what kind of quality are you creating from your soul? That's going to determine the quality of your life. Okay? So as you can see, there might be attempts to slip into one or the other rather than play the game the way it's meant to be played, which is there's a distortion, creates an event in your life that creates a certain type of discomfort. I say that there's 4 types of negative feelings. I separate feelings from emotions, from thought patterns or images, and from sensations. That's how I separate the realms of consciousness. At the spirit level, there are feelings. At the soul level, there are emotions. At the mind level, there are intentions. The thought patterns, which are put together by intention, and then which are images. Patterns are images, of course. Uh, and then the sensations, and these are physical sensations, which is, like this phone, this table that is on. These are sensations. You can say there's all the solid matter. It's a sensation. It's an illusion that there's anything solid. Sensation. So that's why the physical world is all just a world of sensations. So now, I have to say that what you really want in your soul desire, only appears after the alchemy is done. Because before the alchemy is done, you're gonna do some stupid ass shit that is mean nothing, just to pacify those negative feelings. There are 4 of them, 4 types, and based on those 4 elements, because your soul is meant to be that pure of ether. It's not supposed to contain matter in your soul. That's when people sometimes say, the heart of coal or ego. That's when your soul contains matter, and that matter is ego. And it can be fire dominant, water dominant, earth dominant, or air dominant. And it creates the feeling of pain, which is fire dominant, the feeling of poison, which is water dominant, the feeling of pressure, which is earth dominant, and then there's the feeling of air, which is delirium or confusion. The feeling of confusion and delirium, which is air dominance. Okay, and so the alchemy game is to align all of those 4 elements back into the ether. Okay, back into the spirit, actually, and then naturally the soul immediately takes that spirit and turns into the ether, which are positive emotions. So the game is about taking this old matter, dissolving it, creating ether from creating the spirit. Actually, out of the spirit evaporates. When you have a spirit and it evaporates, that's ether. That evaporation, that's kind of almost like a smoke thing. It's like smoke dynamics, actually display of how ether is moving. I also want to say something about the yin and yang here, and the masculine and feminine, which can bring a lot of clarity, because sometimes there's this confusion to say, is it electricity? Is it masculine? Is it magneticity? Is it masculine? It's like, what is it? And there's a lot of confusion there. And I couldn't not see the clarity there until recently, when I saw that, like, there's an interchangeable dynamics. There's 2 types of feminine and 2 types of masculine. As within, so without. They flip the roles. Let me explain. So, fire and air dynamic. So, when you burn fire, how does the fire know how it's going to move? Or when you see the lightning in the sky, how did that discharge of that energy, that fire energy, knew exactly what kind of form create that tree? How? It's because there was already magneticity and the openness in the field, the path of least resistance, that this was constructed by the air, so to speak, right? Air. I'm using air as an elemental way, not literal air, but I'm also using example from the literal air, because it just represents that. Because this is exact same thing what happens in your state of consciousness. The feeling, the way it moves, and what kind of pattern it creates, it determines by that magnetism in your soul, so that ether is like watching a smoke move, and you watch the smoke dynamics and you see like, what the fuck? It's such a fluid and interesting dynamic movement. You're watching the ether at play, and you're watching the primordial feminine and masculine at play, which is an interaction of fire and air in this particular case. Okay, and it denotes the electricity and magnetism. So in this case, fire initiates the movement, but how it's going to be moved, it's determined by the magnetism. So in this case, the feminine magnetism leads the masculine electricity. The spark moves in exactly the same pattern as the feminine suggests. So feminine is suggesting, and the masculine is listening and moving exactly the same pattern as the feminine magneticity is suggesting at this level within. Now, without, things change and they flip around. Okay. Without, now we're dealing with water and earth. Now, water is known to move through earth, like you see the mountain, and then the river is flowing based on how the mountain is structured. And so the structure is masculine now. Okay, and I know that this may be confusing because in the literature there's a lot of misconception of what do you mean by earth, but elemental earth is masculine. It's not feminine. It's not. I'm not talking about the earth Gaia and other things, right? But I don't want to move too much. I'm just talking about exactly what you observe through your own observation and not literature. This is not borrowed from the literature. We're watching it happen. And we're asking question, how does the smoke or fire know how to move exactly? There must be information in the magnetic field for it to move exactly like that. And that's why the masculine energy will move in the most elegant and appropriate and the truthful way if it's listening of what that magnetism is suggesting. And this is why the decisions that are coming from logos, not logics, but from logos, are determined by the shape of the arrows. So, and I've experienced that, how intuitive decisions were arising in me, and I was doing this, and it was just a sensation or the feeling of me listening into the field, and that field is suggesting that is the path of least resistance. Move here, and then I move there, and it was like a perfect move. Okay, on the feeling level. Now, on external level, the earth and the water dynamic. Now it's different, right? Now the earth, the masculine, is suggesting the structure for the water to flow. You see, dynamic changes, and so, like the infrastructure that men built, the culture, all of these things that are being built that are not just physical, infrastructures and the physical, that will determine of how things gonna go. Then you have like these bureaucratic and law structures that are being built that still pertain to the physical. And then that there are mental structures, which determines the culture that is sort of like unofficial, right? Not of how it's been written and printed, it's how people are moving in due to their our own wiring inside, but that's also masculine. You see, the masculine is like earth can be seen on all of these different levels, except the spirit when it goes back into the fifth element ether. That's when it's all one. They're not four elements. But in the mind, in the mental space, memory is earth. In the physical world, the structure, that's some things that's been written down, physical memory is earth. You see? And in a soul, Earth is not supposed to be there. But if it's there, it's ego, and it's that stubbornness, rigidity. It's also memory, where it's not supposed to be. It's a memory in your soul. That's also Earth, because it's the structure. Okay. Also, as I said, another type of memory, you can call it like long-term memory, right? Because it's kind of formed and stays there for long term, Earth. And then there's also short-term memory, which is air, which is a temporary structure that is just for the time being, spontaneous. And so you can listen to that. So this is when if you're creating music, you're listening to that thing that is there and spontaneously creating the movements. That is this creative side of it. So in art, the feminine suggesting for what kind of move the masculine must take, and in the science is the opposite, the masculine suggesting what kind of move the feminine must take. Okay, so those four elements in the mind has its own, because like I said, when you split the toroidal field, you have upper toroidal field and a lower toroidal field, and then you have the central toroidal field is either going to be the soul toroidal field or the ego toroidal field that will be looking for the reciprocation. So each own toroidal field has those four elements in there, still interacting, creating states of consciousness of the body, a state of consciousness in the mind, and then a state of consciousness in your heart, in your soul. So, yeah, I just plugged in and explained a little bit more of the masculine and feminine dynamic in this little model of consciousness. Why is it important? Well, based on this little model, like I said, there are 4 games of life. I say alchemy, magic, and might sometimes, or devotion, obedience, and care. These are just words that I use, but they can be used interchangeably. But really, there are 4, because alchemy deals with dissolution of the matter into spirit. Theurgy, which is the soul magic, deals with creation of the positive emotions, these ether patterns that feels like emotions, joyful emotion, like joy is bliss in form. It's already a pattern, you see. Then the image that joy creates, that's the mind magic, that's thaumaturgy. And then there is the physical world, of course, and that is physiurgy, if you will. And that's just the mastery of the interaction of the physical world. And the way things work in the soul works very different how it works in the mind, and works very different how it works in the body. And so this is why you've got to have an understanding of how to play each game. You cannot apply the laws of physics that you learned that works really well in the physiology and the laws of the soul. You see, there are different laws. The same thing with the mind. You cannot apply those same laws on the mind. For example, in the physical world, this concept called doubt is very useful, because when you're seeing something, hearing somebody through the world of sensations, doubt is appropriate in this case. Because if you have no doubt, everything you see, you would believe, right? So doubt is very appropriate, and doubt helps you to figure out things, how it works in the physical world for real. That's a scientific principle based on doubt. It says, like, well, I doubt it, so let me see how it actually works. It creates this investigation, and that's normal. Now, in imagination, doubt has no place, because if you intend to imagine something, right, that's your desire, right, the picture is supposed to arise as your intent arises. But if the doubt is there, say, well, now, you know, it's not it, because, I saw in my memory, in the world of sensation, the physical world, that it's not that. You see, and if then you introduce the doubt into the astral world, then it blocks your creativity. And so, in the imagination world, there's a complete denial of what is in the physical world, and there's a creation of your astral world, which you want to eventually live in the physical world. Of course, it has to be not like the physical world. So doubt does not really have any role there. And so the energy dynamics in your mind is very different from the physical dynamics. Does that make sense? For example, if you introduce like the concept of competition in your mind, that's, it's ridiculous. You can't do that, because then you're going to create a competition in the physical world. And the only reason there is a concept of a competition in the mental world is because you based and you introduced that concept from the experience in the physical world, and you can't do that because laws are different in the mental world. They're very different. You can walk through walls. You can adjust your environment any way you want. There's lots of freedom there in the world of form that is mental and astral. Okay? And but if you treat that world as if it's the physical world, then you're going to have the same hard time as in the physical reality. But in that world, you have full authority of editing it the way you want. And so where is the doubt? What kind of role does the doubt play there? Doesn't really play any role, you see. And then when you go to the soul, the laws are even more different. And the point of this little model is to put everything in the right places. And how are you going to put everything in the right places? Only through the alchemy and the clarity that arises, something, for example, from the confusion. When you have the confusion, which is air dominance in your soul, you sit with it until it solidifies in something that is clear. Because there's a confusion, the mind can intervene and say, well, let me make a decision. Okay, that's not your jurisdiction. The soul's jurisdiction is to bring that skewed energy towards air back into the ether. And from that ether, there's going to be a beautiful positive emotion that's arising. And that beautiful positive emotion, there's going to be insight arising in your mind, and there's going to be the answer and the clarity. And as you see the answer and the clarity, that's the world that I want. That's what I really wanted, and you're experiencing it, and then that's how you put it into the motion of coming into the physical reality as well. Okay. And sometimes they're called, when these four realms are called king, lover, magician, warrior. This is basically saying the world of spirit, alchemy, the world of ether, theurgy, the world of, I should say the realm, not the world, the realm of mana, which is thaumaturgy, magic, and then the world of vitality, which is just a name of physical life force energy. That life force energy has different forms: spirit, ether, mana, vitality. Again, I'm just plugging these names there to describe the different form of the same energy. To move something from one place to another, you need this energy called vitality. That includes everything. Like the world, the kinetic world, the physical world is a kinetic world. Got to connect a dot from one to another, and you need to use kinetic energy to connect it. And I call that vitality, whether it's biological, technological. That energy is one classed as vitality. And the same thing, to imagine something, you also need energy, and that energy is I call it mana. And to have emotion and to create a beautiful emotion in your heart, you need ether, and that comes from the spirit. Okay. Okay. And it can also help you, like if you're a man, you'll know where to focus on, and for example, and say, all right, in the world of feelings and emotions, there's a type of listening that you have to do for that decision to arise. Passionate about something. And only when you're quiet, that feminine is suggesting you the way. And so then you take that inspired action, or do you receive inspiration this way? Okay. But in the physical, your role as a man changes. Now you need to create structures that conduce joy, enjoyment, And so then you create your family culture, you create the infrastructures, what kind of house you want to have. And I'm trying to say, like, you create your culture. And if you're a woman, then you know that to inspire a man cannot be done through external means and by force, or even saying something to a man. The worst that you can do is you can't make a man by telling him how to be a man if you're a woman. If you look deeper, you'll see the falsehood and the nonsense that creates this type of idea. This is why all these women who are talking about men, they have no idea how to be a woman. That's the first thing. If you just have your concern to be about how to be a woman, don't worry. The man will either appear in respect of what kind of feminine energy you have, and if you are evolving as a woman, he is going to be evolving as a man, and vice versa. So the leading and the following happens inside. The woman is leading, and she's not leading by words, it's not leading by demanding, she's leading by the feeling. She's creating this space of peace, and in that peace, inspiration, that is the right inspiration, comes that exactly of what you needed at that moment, that you don't have to say a word. And so I've experienced that, and it's amazing how it works. And there is almost like a telepathic communication and harmony. Now, in the physical world, now it changes. Man creates the structures, but he also has to create the structures that a woman would enjoy. What kind of feelings and emotions and sensations she's going to have by moving through the structures that the man created, which are skills, habits, infrastructure, culture, everything, right? Like, what kind of experience she's going to have when she's going to go through this roller coaster that you've created. It's like water running through the mountain or the valley. And that's the experience that she's going to have. This is why at this level, women don't really have much choice. She just chooses a man who has good structure and just goes with it. And what you're going to get, that's what you're going to get. And if the man is a little bit more, evolving, he will see the lack of a structure and say, oh, that wasn't, like, I got to adapt this a little bit better. And he's going to be tweaking the structure of his life to accommodate the harmonious flow of the feminine energy through it. And so this is how you can have harmony, and this is how healthy relationship dynamic really works. Everything else is absolute nonsense, arguments, waste of time, and just not the way the life's meant to be worked. And I'll say that this one thing that is often missed, and this is this process of the alchemist, is to what happens when you have these negative feelings inside of you. Are you going to allow them to change before you take any action or make a decision? Are you going to allow them to dissolve through the alchemy and devotion? If that's what you're going to do, if this is part of your life, then you're going to be living in the right direction. Because then there's going to be positive emotions that create the positive images and the positive sensations to the physical reality. And there's also a realization what your really soul desires. Because when you dissolve the ego, you don't want what the ego wants anymore. But there's another desire that the soul wants. It's like, oh, I wanted that. I didn't really wanted this. That's what I really want. And so you realize what you really want, and then you go for that, and that comes into your life. So this process is the biggest disappointment of the ego, because it's eroding the ego. And it's usually what the ego wanted that works temporarily, soul can acquire that it is in a perpetual manner that can be continuously enjoyed, that keeps getting better and better. This is why ego can never compete with the soul in terms of enjoyment of life. But your physical body must continue acting as the ego, just in the physical world. You see? There's this, for example, like if you have like a playful competition in the physical world, that's healthy for the body. Movement is healthy for the body. But you're playing a game. What I'm trying to say is that not to make a mistake that, well, if ego in the soul is bad, then it's going to be bad in the body. It's not. The laws, the way that works in the body is different. You see, it's only bad when it's in the soul. When you have a motive in your soul, that's when it's bad. But when you have a motive in the body, that's okay. But also, some people, when they have darkness in the soul, they try to compensate through the physical means. And then you have some people who are like maniacs, engaging in this physical activity over and over again as a compensating mechanism to compensate for the darkness in the soul. And so even the exercise that they do is not even to enjoy, is to conquer themselves, that darkness that they have inside. And it has an expiration date, and at some point that darkness is going to have to be faced, and no exercise will help you. But exercise is really good when you have a healthy heart and your body wants to move. And so you do that because it's enjoyable. Okay. As you can see, if you don't do that work with your soul, with your heart, everything else you do is going to be tainted, no matter how good of intentions you have. The quality of the results is going to be, you know, you can have all the things like in the form, say, well, I have this, I have this, I wanted to, to be married, I wanted to have a car, I wanted to have a house. Look, I have all of these things that I wanted. Why the fuck am I so miserable? Why? You see, it's because, you know, you skipped the process that determines the quality of your experience. All right, guys, almost 1 hour. I tried to make it shorter, but it turned out as always. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed it. Peace, and I'll see you in the next one.